If you want to understand why some people buy and some people don't, then you need to understand how your customers' brains work in order to evaluate information and make buying decisions. And the better you understand those invisible forces at play, well, the better you're going to be able to create high converting and truly effective and engaging marketing campaigns that break through and really make an impact. And this stuff's important because if you get this wrong or ignore it completely, then your business is just going to blend in. You'll be forced to compete on price alone, continually slashing prices and offering more and more discounts. And you may very well end up just being another sad statistic of a business that could have and should have, but didn't. But get this right and take the time to truly create marketing and messages that work with the brain and how it naturally processes information and makes buying decisions, and well, making a sale becomes almost effortless and automatic. This is because you'll no longer have to shout or scream or yell at people to get them to pay attention. Instead, customers come to you, interested, engaged, wanting to know more, and wanting to buy. You see, the sad but undeniable truth is that in today's hyper-competitive business world, well, it's not the best business that wins, but the business with the best marketing. And the best marketing and the best marketers today know that in order to create those truly effective marketing campaigns, you need to work with the brain. So let me show you how it's done and dive into brain-based marketing, also known as neuromarketing. Neuromarketing is all about studying and trying to understand the way that the brain works in order to evaluate information and process different inputs and essentially arrive at some kind of logical buying decision. For a more technical answer though, this is what Erhart had to say from the Harvard Business Review. The field of neuromarketing, sometimes known as consumer neuroscience, studies the brain to predict and potentially even manipulate consumer behavior and decision making. Now I'll admit, I don't necessarily like the word manipulate, so we're gonna say influence or persuade, maybe convince. Regardless, neuromarketing is all about measuring what's going on inside the brain and measuring different neural and physiological signals. These are things like conducting brain scans to measure different neurological activity, and things like physiological tracking to measure eye movement. Essentially just to see what's going on and what people are doing. But before we dive into the specifics, first a really quick high-level overview of the differences between neuromarketing and marketing psychology. Neuromarketing, like I just said, is all about measuring what's going on inside the brain. And it does this using all kinds of different tools and fancy and sophisticated equipment like an fMRI, which can cost upwards of $5 million, and an EEG, which is a more respectable but still really expensive $20,000. Essentially, neuromarketing is typically conducted in some kind of lab or controlled environment because it involves the use of, well, scanning a brain. And that stuff's complicated. Marketing psychology, on the other hand, looks more at what people do and how they actually behave. Now, of course, neither science is completely perfect, so like all things, it's best to use kind of a combination approach and picking and choosing the best results and the most applicable studies when applying them to your business and to your situation. So the next question then is, why study neuromarketing at all? Well, my friend, in a word, money. And in 5 words, better results with less money. Also known as increasing ROI or return on investment. Increasing your business's profitability by getting more from less. And overall, growing your business by appealing to your customers' brains and what matters most to them. The underlying principle of all of this, though, is that we as humans are just not as rational as we like to think we are. For example, we buy things based on emotion and then justify the purchase rationally after the fact. Most of the decisions we make on a day-to-day basis, well, they're relatively subconscious and automatic and involve no or very little conscious activity at all. And we're trying to interact and engage in a very technologically advanced world, but we're operating with this millennia-old hardware and a brain that really hasn't evolved that much in tens of thousands of years. In fact, most evolutionary psychologists tend to agree that we're operating with the same brain systems and structures and instincts that we did way back in our hunter-gatherer days. Now I appreciate it. First, this might sound incredibly discouraging. I mean, tens of thousands of years of evolution later, and we're still making decisions like cavemen? But at least from a marketing and business perspective, this news is actually quite good. Because this means that we can study and therefore predict and therefore influence consumer behavior and decision making. So let me show you some examples of exactly what this looks like in the real world. One of the most interesting takeaways from the field of neuromarketing is how the area of your brain associated with pain can actually light up and be activated when you're buying something, depending on whether or not the thing that you're buying is perceived as a good value or not. Long story short, the right price can make both your customer happy and your business happy. But the wrong price, well, it can kill your business before it's even had a chance. There was a famous pricing study done by Cornell that looked at how different pricing was perceived when presented on a restaurant menu. So here's how the prices were presented. The first was numerical with a $sign. So the $sign, then 12, then a decimal, and 2 zeros. The next was numerical without $sign or decimal, so in this case just 12. And finally, it was spelled out. So in this case, TWELVE and then dollars. Now the researchers suspected that the spelled out version was going to perform best, but in actuality, the winner was the numerical without $sign or decimal. In this case, 12, well, it significantly outperformed and outsold the other options. But pricing gets a little more complicated when we contrast this study against others that looked at something called charm pricing. A joint study was conducted by MIT and the University of Chicago that looked at the influence and effect that ending a price in 9, also known as a charm price, had on purchase behavior. The study looked at pricing a standard piece of women's clothing at 3 different prices. The first was $34, the second, $39, and the third, $44. The interesting and kind of obvious takeaway by this point of the presentation is that the price that was listed at $39 outsold the other options. But charm pricing isn't always a sure thing either, especially when we're talking about luxury goods. Here's the thing with luxury goods. They typically provide some additional status signaling benefit beyond their simple utilitarian uses. This is why if you're selling something that increases someone's status or increases their perceived level of identity or some kind of other aspirational attribute that they have, well, slapping a charm price on the end may not be the best plan because it will signal a discount and can often infer that the brand wasn't necessarily that sure of the price it was charging anyway, so it felt the need to discount. The key thing here though, when we're talking about setting prices and really understanding what's going on inside your customers' brains, is to really know your target market. For example, do they value discounts and getting a bargain? In which case you probably want to use charm pricing. Or do they value premium and luxury goods? In which case you'll probably want to use a number that's numerical and doesn't show any decimals. Are they buying a product or service that's more selfish and more for them, like say financial independence or a fancy sports car? In this case, you'd want to use financial imagery and currency in order to prime them and to get them to act more selfishly and more in their best interest. Or is the purchase that they're making more about others, like a gift or a charitable donation? If that's the case, then you want to avoid financial imagery in order to get them to think more generously. Of course, one way to make price less of an issue altogether is to use the art and science of branding to increase the perceived value of your offer. Us marketers have always known the power of a brand, but it appears that science has gotten on board too now. A study was conducted in Germany where they hooked up participants to an fMRI machine and then showed them images of different brands. Some images were of familiar and well-known brands, and other images were of less familiar and sometimes unknown brands. And as usual, the brain did not disappoint. When the subjects were presented with images of well-known and familiar brands, their brain scans lit up in the areas associated with positive emotions and rewards. But when the subjects were presented with images of lesser-known or unfamiliar brands, well, the areas in their brain that lit up were associated with memory, probably because they were trying to figure out where they saw this before, or worse, negative emotions. This study led the research to the logical conclusion that your brain may be determining what car you buy before you've even taken a test drive. The point is, strong brands elicit strong emotions in your customers' brains. The marketing psychology term associated with this is the mere exposure effect, which is essentially just that the more somebody sees you and the more familiar they are with you, the more they like you and trust you. This is another reason that increasing touch points and staying top of mind with your customers is just a really good idea. The more they see you, the more they like you, and the more they trust you. And a strong brand can even overpower your physical senses, as is the case in this next example with Pepsi versus Coke. I remember the Pepsi challenge like it was yesterday, waiting in line to get a tiny cup full of sugary carbonated water, and then being asked which one I preferred. At the time, my childish and unsophisticated palate really couldn't tell the difference. But according to Pepsi, the results were unanimous. In blind taste tests across the globe, Pepsi had hammered Coke and become the undisputed and clear winner as the better tasting beverage. That was until Pepsi lifted the veil and participants could actually see what they were drinking. And the moment that the participants saw the Coke logo, everything changed. You see, when the brand names were visible, the parts of the brain associated with self-identification lit up much stronger in the participants who were drinking Coke or saw the Coke logo. The Coke brand therefore had a significantly stronger emotional impact on the participants and led them to pretty much all universally prefer Coke over Pepsi. This effect was so strong that even when they put the Coke logo over Pepsi, well, people still preferred whatever beverage had the Coke logo on it. But as interesting as all of this is, it's really just the tip of the iceberg. And this is why the very next thing you're gonna wanna do is check out the video that I've got linked up right here on 15 psychological marketing triggers to make people buy from you. So make sure to check it out now, and I'll see you in the next video. This is why, as a marketer, I'm so obsessive about the customer journey and about the marketing funnel, and really dialing in not just every step, but specifically